All right, it's about time. I want to get started so that we honor the people that have come here and shared your time with us today. Thanks very much. This is a huge opportunity to be able to interact with you. The system that we're going to talk about right now isn't a JPL system. It's out there for everyone to use, and that's kind of the point, is there's a lot of kind of hysterical hype going on for the positive side of it and the negative side of it. And I thought it would be really useful to get this brilliant community together where we can interact with each other and start actually talking about what are the pros. Because if there aren't any pros, there's no point in even discussing the cons. We just shouldn't use it. And if there are pros, that will dramatically inform the discussion. So today, I would like you to actually participate in that creative process with me. That will be the second half of the workshop. The first half of the workshop will set the stage for it, talk about what it is a little bit, and get everybody socialized, not just in terms of what it is, but some useful paradigms you can use to speed your own accelerate your own understanding of the system and actually find your own use cases. There are two links you need to know about. They are already in your calendar invite. The first is the community spreadsheet that is capturing real JPL use cases that people have used and found it useful. It has accelerated their workflow. The second link is the link to ChatGPT itself. And I will apologize, GPT is a hideous acronym. It immediately gave me dyslexia that I can't seem to shake. So you may hear me say GTP and a bunch of other things. I do know it's GPT. I don't know why that's happening exactly, but three-letter acronyms are a big problem. So at any time, feel free to log in and use your laptops and get those things set up as we go forward. If you still have problems after an hour to get those things going, let us know and we'll work with you at the end. But let's dive into it. All right, and I just said all of that without that slide, so let's keep going. I wanted to pause for a minute and give a shout out to the Data Science Working Group. So this is a generic working group about all things data science, all the way from the research side, trying to push and advance the approaches and techniques that researchers using data science at JPL do, all the way to taking systems built on this stuff and actually finding JPL use cases for it and infusing it. So we have this structure out there. It is your structure for you to reach out to. If you find more use cases, please reach out and share. If you find other applications like this, reach out and let us know and tell us what's really being useful. It has representation from across the entire org, and it's here to serve you, and we'd love to hear from you. So very easy to get to, dswg.dpl.nasa.gov. There are regular meetings and a variety of representatives that can engage your questions. All right, so why a workshop and why did I think this might actually help today? Because your time is very valuable and I want to make excellent use of it. We need to do what we're about to do together. It's a grassroots community response, and this is why. There's a lot of discussions happening right now that are very top-down. What is the philosophical implications of this? What is the ethical implications of this? But very few people can actually tell you what this is. If you focus on the this, they describe how it was built. And that's data science. It's very interesting. I'm a data science researcher and I love that stuff. But really, we should define what this is in terms of what it can do, because then we know the object that we're analyzing. And now we can talk about ethics in an informed and meaningful way. We especially want to do this to inform upper level management who may be called upon to actually make a statement about should we or should we not be using this? And wouldn't it be nice if the community could inform that decision first rather than later on whether it's even useful for our purposes? You are the experts that will help us do this. No one can tell you how useful this system is for you. And I'm not here to persuade you that it's useful. I'm here to share from the community document what people have already shared with me, and I'm just trying to be a facilitator. But today's meeting isn't about me either. It's about you, and that's why I'm going to need your help later on. We're going to drive the conversation back toward reality in a data-driven manner, measure the pros and cons separately. Today is about the pros. We can have meetings about the cons later on. Today's about the pros. It also is an open resource right now. It is shared openly with you on the web, and that's a fully democratic way to get access to it. So you might as well take advantage of it before they really figure out how they can fully monetize the thing. There is a version also that is monetized. There's GPT 3 and 4. I'm not advocating you spend your money in any way, and right now you have to spend your personal money because it's not authorized for JPL purchase, but I'm just informing you that those options are out there. Finally, and then I already talked about the decision maker and informing this. At the end of this, I will be taking all this information, we will be, not just myself, writing a brief report just to let upper management know what's going on, and then we will radiate that out to NASA too, because these same kinds of discussions are happening there as well. And I just want to make sure everybody is maximally informed. I'm a researcher, that's my job. As soon as I do that, I step back and say my job is done, and that's exactly what you'll see me do. All right, so the schedule for today, we're going to talk for about 20 minutes just in a scene setting of what the heck is this thing and how can you use it usefully. I'm going to share with you what I thought were some of the most transformational use cases that have popped out of the community document so far. The goal, again, is not to persuade you that this would be useful to you, but rather just to show you these are some things that other people said were incredibly useful, and I agree. They kind of blew my mind. And then we will send you off to find your own. We'll set breakouts up remotely, so everyone remotely can fully interact with this experience, and the local people will as well. The remote folks will find breakouts that are named by the specific themes that they are talking about. And in this room, there are stickers on the wall that are also by theme, so you can spatially group yourselves into whatever thematic area you'd like to talk about when we do the live breakout too. And then at the end, we will fully break out into that, and that will be the end of the experience. And you'll let me know in the community document any new use cases you found, as well as voting. The voting is really important. You're going to have an opportunity to actually tell us what matters to you in your current role, not what hypothetically matters, but oh my gosh, this is useful right now, because then we have a heat map of where in JPL and what kinds of things in JPL actually matter. All right, so what the heck is this thing? It's extremely simple, and it's amazing that it can even do anything at all, really, the way that it's set up. You've seen this technology before. It's answering the question, what do humans tend to say next? That's it. It's not even doing it in the sense of an entire sentence. Word for word, if you have these words, what do humans tend to say next? Another word. Now do it again. Now do it again. And it continues on. The architecture underneath is astoundingly complicated. It is not simple to make a system that actually does this, but the concept is beautifully simple. And what this allows it to do is learn from the entire internet of text and any other source you want to put into it, because you can phrase all that text into a, if you know this, predict the rest of it. You've seen this technology before, and in fact, this technology isn't new. Google Autocomplete already does this for you, but the database that it's trained on are other Google searches. So it's always completing what other people have searched for. In this case, it's completing all of the text in all the contexts. So it learned a much bigger domain. I want to give you a little bit of language. We are not going into the architecture and any of the data science. The model that is behind this is called GPT. There are two main versions right now, 3.5, which is free, it is fast, and its answers are okay. There's GPT-4, which is much slower, significantly slower, and its answers are substantially higher quality. So you will make that determination. You also have to pay $20 a month to get GPT-4 right now, so they're experimenting with monetization. The web interface is neither of these. The web interface is called ChatGPT, and it calls to these back ends, but the web interface is much more restrictive and limited than those models actually are. So if you happen to be a coder, there are APIs already available to you, much more than what the web can do. And you should absolutely go out there, and there's GitHub repositories for free that can teach you how to use it. It's wonderful. Today, I'm only going to talk about the web interface because everyone in this room can use the web interface in a fully democratic way. So I'm going to hit that minimum, that lower bar, but just know those are out there for you. I also wanted to give you a shout out that plugins are coming, which allow it to actually call out and get currently relevant information from specific sources, like Wolfram Alpha and Mathematica, which will allow it to do things like graph data, which will allow it to ask for data about today instead of 2021, which was the limit in its training data. And that's going to change everything. Those aren't here right now. They're in development. So we're not going to consider them for our use cases today because we can't evaluate them. Okay, so what's new and different and important? Why are we talking about ChatGPT if there already were large language models out there? It is an unusually large training set, and this is part of the data science, is how do they manage to train on such a gigantic amount of text and get the system to stabilize and converge, all that good stuff. It also has about 174 billion model parameters, the numbers that actually got adjusted to encode this information. That is absolutely enormous, and it's a scalability question from computer science to how to get this thing to operationally churn out answers on the web live with you in real time. It's a big deal. So I don't want to diminish anything that they did. This is an achievement. It has breakthrough level skill. It is now impressive. Most of the previous things were research projects that were cool if they got a right answer, and sometimes they don't. This one is usually useful, or if it isn't, it's steerable to get there, and that's remarkable. It also has cross-domain relevance. Most of the other ones said, you know what, to make the problem simpler, I'm going to focus on one domain so I get really good at that domain. This one learned all of them, or attempted to do so. And so now you can ask questions that are cross-domain. It turns out that's enormously powerful. It can borrow metaphors from here and explain it over here, compare things that are in different fields. And that's really useful. Now, you'll hear people say, oh my gosh, it's so powerful because it almost approximates the complexity of the human brain. I just want to completely smash that into little tiny bits. If you notice that, oh, you can't even see it. There's a teeny tiny little white dot to the lower left of that human brain icon. That is to scale with the image of the brain in terms of the number of parameter weights the human brain has and ChatGPT does. And that doesn't even acknowledge the fact that the human brain can change its architecture by adapting to the input, and ChatGPT cannot. It is fixed. You are not teaching it anything. It is what it is, and it will keep doing what it's doing forever until they fully retrain the system and stick another number on it, and then it's fixed again. So no one talking about mouse brains or human brains is talking anything about this system at all. Just let it flow by. All right. It's a zero barrier to play, though. They opened this up, they made it easily accessible on the web, and it responds pretty quickly. That's also amazing in the sense that previous large language models, I hope you have a GitHub account, I hope you're comfortable compiling code, and possibly even training it yourself with some data science skill. That barrier to entry was enormous and made very few people play with them and required research funding. This one you just play with, and that's a big deal. Finally, Google search is already out there, and Google search is solving a problem. I have an enormous database of everything that's on the internet, and I'm trying to help you find the entries in that database which are most likely to be useful to you right now. And I'm going to point to the entries in the database. That's how they solve it. But in order to solve it, you now need to know the specific keywords and search terms to get there. And we lovingly call that Google foo, because it took all of us a few years to get good at this skill of what the heck do I type in to find the object that I want. And we've all had that thing of calling up our friend going, I'm going to tell you what I want. You know exactly what I want. Now, what the heck is the search term that will make the search engine find what I want? Oh, thank you. It's called this. I never knew that. ChatGPT gets rid of that. You explain to it what you want, like you would to a friend, and it says, here's the keywords you meant to talk about, and here's the answer. But it does not point to a database entry. It does not say, here are the 3 top entries exactly in my database as they are that are most likely to be of interest. It attempts to summarize them. So it is solving a different problem. But it also is easier to use because it doesn't require that Google foo. It does require you to say very articulately what you need. And that is a skill that's called prompt engineering. And we'll give you some advice on how to do that. But the advantage is that is iterative and it's easier than Google foo, where you just kind of have to know magic information sometimes to get where you want. Okay, now why does it feel alive? And I mean that lovingly and with a smile because I work in this field. I know how these things work. And every once in a while I sit back and go, did like a UFO crash and it's locked in a closet and they just wired the internet up to it and that's what we're actually talking to? Because every once in a while something comes out of it and you're like, how can an autocomplete system really get this believable? There's a reason why we're seeing it that way. And I want to walk you through it so that after this, you're going to understand why it gets things wrong as well. And hopefully in a forgivable way, because it actually isn't getting it wrong. It's just not asking the question you thought it was. So right now, the problem is people make more text than people will ever read. And that's kind of a profound statement. We choose to encode all of our information in text at a rate that no human can ever keep up with. So what almost is the point of that? If you are a domain expert in a narrow niche field, you cannot read all the papers in your own field. We're trying to solve that right now by saying, hey, Google, run a popularity contest and just show me what other people are reading. It's not a good way to find what you want, but it's the best we can do. We might as well just benefit from the masses. And it works okay. Well, wouldn't it be great if you could talk to a system that would summarize all of it and actually help you find things in the bulk rather than the popular items, which is a popularity contest in the end. Work emails per person, 10,000 sent per year, 50,000 received annually. We're just spewing this stuff out. We need help. Everyone needs help. And that's what they're trying to solve here in a different way. By the way, if you just took everything that's in books, magazines, and newspapers and stacked them on top of each other, printed out with no paragraphs, just constant text, it would go to the moon twice. And that's not what's on the internet. That's just books, magazines, and newspapers. So this is the level of the scale of problem we're talking about. No pictures and diagrams, anything else, not even talking about that. ChatGPT allows you to interact with the massive bulk text corpus, not just a few items that are currently popular, not based on how people are clicking on the internet right now. And the more common and frequent the info, the stronger its skill will be. If you ask about something that occurred exactly once somewhere in its training data, it probably isn't going to do a good job. It is a statistical algorithm. It's trying to look for patterns and trends and predict the answer that comes out. If you ask about something with an incredible unique keyword, it'll probably do better because that has a stronger statistical relationship with the records that it has. So these are just some of the rules of thumb of why does it know some things and not others. Now you know. It also tried to learn language because it is a language model. It is not a math model. It has no math engine. It is not an engine that knows coding. It doesn't compile anything or understand it. It is a language model. But it turns out that the language of math ends up being predictable and useful to solve math problems, which actually was a research finding of, oh my God, it kind of learned math. It's not always right, but it's remarkable for a system that doesn't actually compute anything. It also learned a lot about coding, even though it considers it a language, not a computer program. So it is truly remarkable that it learned some of the structures that it did in this generalized concept of language and prediction. Why do we keep thinking that it's alive? Why does that happen? This is why. In biology, you first have to have something that's living, then that has to have a will, then it has to be capable of having thoughts, and then it has to want to answer your question and then produce a coherent response. All those things have to be in place to get a coherent answer out of a blob of organic matter. This system takes an infinite amount of coherent responses, statistically models them, and produces coherent responses.
And Lucas, I'm sorry to interrupt. Do you want me to hold comments or questions?
There will be a Q&A answer at the end, but I would very much welcome whatever you're about to say.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, I love the way that you're framing it because, you know, everybody thinks that you ask it a question and it gets it wrong. And it's like, haha, it doesn't know when the queen died. You're dumb, ChatGPT. When in reality, you and I never have conversations that way because we start to ask around, you know, everything about that. Like, and so if you continue talking to it, back to your math point, my, you know, second grader gets math problems wrong all the time until we reinforce it and continue talking. And I think that's what you're talking about. And I really appreciate that.
And it is a dialogue engine, right? It is based on chat. So thank you. Great comment. That's why we hallucinate that it's alive. We've never seen a system that can do this without being alive. And so our brain intuitively just goes, oh my gosh, it must be alive. It must want out. It must have feelings like me. Stop, stop. You literally are looking in the mirror, seeing yourself and going, oh, right? Just don't, right? It is a statistical model that looks alive because it was trained on us and everything we said. That's it. And that is amazing. And it is shocking that it works. And it's okay you hallucinate a little bit here. Everybody likes to talk about how the system hallucinates, and I will show you one doozy of a hallucination that it can do. So do we. And this is one of the places that we do. All right. So here's the paradigm. Instead of saying what it isn't and to discourage you, so what is it? How to make it actually useful? It's a co-pilot. It's an assistant. It was never intended to replace a human being. It's not even an approximation of a human being. It's there for information retrieval to help you understand things quickly. That's it. Keep it in that context, and it's immediately super useful. Imagine that it's a well-read graduate student that you just hired, or an oddly motivated intern, or an oddly literal new hire, right? They don't know how to do your job yet, and that's okay. But there's tons of things you can delegate to it, and wouldn't we all like to have one of those? Now, the sad thing is it never learns, so that's a little unfortunate. But with everything that it could do on that day one, it can just do forever for zero cost right now. And that's kind of amazing too. So when I phrase it like that, hopefully you go, oh, maybe there is a use for this, even if it's not always right all the time as a magic box. What's our role as humans if we have an assistant like that? It's up to, and this is really important, it's up to us to decide what's useful. I'm going to call this responsible AI. We define the interaction paradigm. We define how to use its answers, what answers it should be asked, and how to come up with them and how to implement them afterwards. That's our job, and there's no way to relinquish that responsibility. This is what we're good at. Don't set it down. Plug this system into a place where you expect a human to be. Well, who exactly is to blame? We don't usually blame our phone's pathfinding algorithm when we drive off a cliff. It doesn't get you out of the responsibility of driving the car. You're driving ChatGPT. You have all the responsibility. That also includes the appropriate amount of trust to give its answers. And I'll explain to you why sometimes it gets things right and gets things wrong, but it's up to you to interpret what that means. So learn that, and then you'll do a much better job. Also, there's the concept of appropriate information and questions. Hopefully, I don't have to educate anyone in this room that cutting and pasting ITAR information into your browser is a pretty bad idea, right? So just let's all internalize that and be one with it for a moment and then move on from that topic. If there were surprising gotchas here, I would want to talk to you about it right now. So far, I haven't found any surprising gotchas or things that like, oh my gosh, this is a new kind of ethics I haven't thought about. Just let's keep going and see what it's useful for and see if there's anything dangerous out there. So humans are great on focusing on what we're actually good at decisions, generation, guiding the work, refining ideas, judging our progress, determining next steps, and correcting the system. Embrace that role. The assistant, turns out, is great at doing things like summarizing things, finding differences between them, covering your bases with initial draft. Everybody hates writing one of those. You start out with a blank page. Now you don't have to. It might not be what you wanted, but it's a heck of a lot closer than you were a moment ago. Rewrite with slight changes. I do not want to think about every place in the text I have to change this, but it sure is trivial to do. This is a great thing for an assistant to do. And then reformatting data, you're really good at, actually, and we'll get into all those things. So let's actually get into it. What's it good at so far? And now I'm going to actually be begging your indulgence a little bit because we're going to do some live demos and we all know how those go. And I'm going to be doing it with the system itself. So first, the emerging thematic areas. I didn't come up with these areas. I looked at all the different use cases that were put into the community document and I tried to group them together. We can argue about the edges of them and all that stuff. I'm sure there's a totally different set that somebody else could have come up with, but they're not bad. And I want to expose them to you to start you getting thinking about what it might be useful for in your area. Ideation, expose me to new ideas. Here's what I know. Here's my goals. Give me some ideas to consider. If half of the bullet points it comes up with are useful, you win, because that's a bunch of new things that you can think about now. It wasn't here to summarize you or an entire field. It was here to give you some ideas. Self-teaching. I want to rapidly understand something. Now, we already have a web, and it is filled with tutorials. But what this thing can do is you can say, I already know X, Y, Z. I'm confused about this one thing. Give me a tutorial that focuses on that. So it's customization to exactly where you know you need help. And that is tremendous. Coding and programming, we could have a whole nother workshop on. It is unbelievable in this area, all the way from document this for me, to here is the documentation, produce the function for me, to I'm getting this error, what do you think, to where's the exploits. It is remarkably skilled at offering insight. Is it a debugging tool that tells you all the bugs in it? Of course not. It actually doesn't even necessarily compile a code, but it can predict things. And it turns out that humans have predicted a lot on the internet, so it's pretty good at it. Reformatting and translation, you can specify to it, here's this data in this format, turn it into YAML, turn it into JSON, turn it into a paragraph for people who don't understand machine learning, turn it into an acceptance letter, right? It just, even the generalized concept of reformatting, it is extraordinarily powerful in a way that I've really never seen before, except in large language models. And that gets down to writing. What it really learned is the skill of writing and the structure of writing and what humans tend to sound like. And it turns out the average of humans trying to sound good is pretty good. So it learned that, which means if you ever are writing a difficult technical passage and you're like, man, that is so wordy and awful, but I just can't find a way out of it, you can literally say, rephrase this for me. And if you don't like what it did, you can click regenerate and it does it again a different way. This is tremendous. And you're not irritating anyone to be your editor while you're doing it. I also really want to give a shout out to people who have English as a second language, because that is an enormous burden to put on someone who's already operating in a technical environment and trying to operate in a language they didn't grow up in. And now they're editing their emails and looking at all this stuff to make sure they're sounding professional. This system is tremendous. You don't need to give it quality code. It just does the right thing. So type in whatever you want, get loose, get sloppy. How would you suggest phrasing this? It doesn't solve the problem for you. It gets a lot closer though, and that's helpful.
One of the fun things too is to say, take my words, but do it in the voice of Carl Sagan. Yes. Much better.
And we'll get into, it is eerily, it is eerily good at role playing. To hallucinate for a moment, it likes it, right? It gives you a screenplay of this is exactly what the different roles would say, but they're also useful while it's doing it. So consider that. We'll talk about it more. Finally,
a quick question about that. And you can say that we're going to talk about this later, but if you're using this to, say, treating it as an editor for your technical papers and such, how do you balance getting in the way of your own development as a writer? How do you use this tool without becoming dependent on it?
I would argue that getting dependent on a computer to do numeric calculations is a good idea, but in this case, I find getting feedback from people useful. And now the cost of getting feedback is very low. It never writes well enough that you're like, I'm just going to give it the control. It's done. I don't need me anymore. It doesn't get there because it doesn't have the context in the higher level stuff. So its answers can be useful, but it never even challenges the question you just posed of what's my role anymore. You'll know very quickly.
Well, and at some level, this is Chris Knappman. I don't know who was just on the phone, but at some level, related to editing documents and things like that, whether we like it or not, this will be integrated into future versions of 365 and Microsoft tools, and it's already being done that way because of Microsoft's contribution to it. So it's already auto-completing things. It's already pieces of this are coming. Yep. Thank you.
And
Just to say, Apple software, lots of people can cross that. Sound good. Actual musician.
so we don't.
Could you repeat the question? I couldn't, or the comment, I
Okay.
couldn't hear it.
Yeah, and we should probably hold questions for the Q&A or we'll be here all day,
Yeah.
but please, for now.
No, I was just saying that this reminds me a lot of Apple's GarageBand, because it could make non-musicians sound musical, but they're not musicians. And if you use ChatGPT, you're not a writer. However, the vast majority of people are not going to be writers, and this can really help them. So I'm 100% on board with that. But I wouldn't worry about, for the actual writer, for the actual artist, it's not going to compromise.
And in fact, I would say if there's creativity in what you're doing, if you are handcrafting a beautiful piece of writing, why are you talking to this system? It is designed to give pretty good answers on average of what other people have said. So this is for bulk writing. It's for all those emails you didn't want to write. It's to get that first draft of the paper that then you refine by hand. So it gets rid of a bunch of stuff you didn't want to do that's boring. If this is your passion and your love and you have skill in it, that is not what we're trying to automate here at all. The human is even more important than before. You were less important before because most of the time you weren't being a human, you were being a machine. And hopefully we can start giving some of the machine tasks back to the machine and get back to being a human. So I totally support what you're saying.
Thank you very much for that response. This is coming from the perspective of someone who's like really new and skeptical of this, which is why I attended this seminar today.
And you should be, because what I want all of you to do after this is see if it really is useful for you. I need to hear from everybody. This is not a hypothetical discussion. I want it to be an empirical discussion of experiences you've had.
Thank you.
Yeah, I am not selling you. Okay, a little bit of, now we're actually going to get a little bit more into how they use the system. So you control it with prompts, and we're going to do live demos, so you're going to see me embarrass myself by actually attempting to do that. But there's a lot to do of people saying, oh, it didn't know my thing, where it got it wrong. And let's talk about that a little bit. It knows an astounding amount of information in the knowing sense of it was exposed to it. It knows nothing. It does not understand anything, but it was exposed to a staggering amount of information. So if you go up to it and say, tell me 5 methods to make cheese, it will do a pretty good job based on its training data because it was exposed to that information. You provided almost nothing here. You gave it the context of the question, and that's it. So if it can't tell you exactly what you want, it's just a function of the data that it was exposed to, which is kind of interesting and kind of not. But all the way on the right, I want to expose you to a very different way to interact with it, where we benefit from the language it was exposed to and extracted, but it doesn't depend on its training data for the answer. Here is my paper, cut, paste, summarize it for me. Talks about the data you just gave it. So it knows that because you just gave it to it. And so now its answers are going to be incredibly relevant. So just know that there are these two complete polar opposite kinds of interactions we have, and a lot of them are now in the middle. And I find those to be the most useful often, which is to say, here's an agenda for my upcoming meeting, cut, paste. Here's my role in the meeting and the goal that I want. Suggest some items from your training data that I might have missed. And so now you're doing both. And that's a huge hybridization between the two. So just keep that in mind when people want to evaluate it all the way on the left. That actually isn't touching the majority of its use cases, which are, I think, mostly on the right. All right, so now some inspiring examples. We are going to get the red box most likely at one point or another. The red box usually says, oh, I'm sorry, an error has occurred. You press refresh on your browser if you see that, that's it. So I'm just warning you now because I want you to be very realistic. What we're going to do is we're going to do an example where we summarize a website. And I really like this because it's extremely useful. All of us can do it. All of us have needed this. And at the same time, I can also make it hallucinate and really embarrass itself. So let's see what I can do here. And this is the first time that we're going to do this together. The website that I am accessing with you, and let me get rid of that annoying window right now, is my group's website. So it is one that I am not alienating in any terrible way. There's no proprietary information or anything. This is already URS cleared and everything else. So let's just move on from that. but it's a big website. It has a whole bunch of stuff about the products that my group makes and all that. And all I did is just copy and paste. And then I go back into my session. I'm going to refresh it just so that I don't get the red box right away. I'm going to give you, sorry, a website. Please summarize it. If you understand, say okay. All right, okay. Boom, there's the entire website in its entirety. And it starts immediately summarizing it using hopefully a lot less text. Now, that was pretty fast. That's because we're using the free version, 3.5. Its answers aren't as good as the 4.0 version, but 4.0 really is like, you get to watch it think as it goes. So I choose which one I want to use depending. For the demo purposes, I'm going to stick to the free version because it's free and because I want it to go quickly. But let's go farther than that. Actually, what I meant to say is I want you to use exactly 200 words. This is how you control how much you wanted to say out. 100 words, 500 words, whatever you can control what comes out of the system. Then, and you can do stuff too. This is a common thing. It's off thinking and generating something and you're already thinking in your next prompt because you know where you're going. So this is a good modality. You can also say knock it off if you don't like that it's going farther. Now make it into a bulleted list for me. Bloop, 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 bloop. There's the website in a simpler to digest form that you might like. And I also specified I want no more than 10 words each. Otherwise, it might make a bulleted list and just stick the entire website underneath each bulleted list, right? It's going to comply with exactly what you say. So be very specific in what you want. Don't get upset if it does something that you didn't tell it couldn't do. Now, I would like you to write a summary paragraph to explain to the general public what my group does. And boom, there's the context. And this is some of the magic you're already starting to feel of, oh my gosh, this actually might be at a level where we could get this out with, through the full URS clearance to the general public without straining over how do I explain this, what metaphors to use, things like that. Oh, wait, I actually have a second use case. Do the same thing again, but now for experts in machine learning. And it leaves all the jargon back in again and actually does a pretty good job of it. You need to read these as they come out. You really do need to make sure that it did a good job. That is always going to be your goal. You don't cut paste this and say, hey, it said it was okay. Now, let's actually get a little weirder. I would now like to write a cover letter as a hiring candidate seeking to show enthusiasm and interest in this group, discuss the passion for robotic space exploration, understandable machine learning, identify several items in the website that I don't even specify that I find particularly interesting, and by showing an openness to learn. You now have a binary decision to make from any cover letter you receive. If you receive a bad cover letter, they do not know how to use ChatGPT. If you receive a good cover letter, it now means nothing because that was zero cost. So these are those things that people like to think about of, oh my God, what does it mean? Fine. All of you will now be enabled to go have that thought. That's not what we're doing today. I'm just showing you what it seems to be good at. So pretty nice, right? And of course, you should now go in and edit this because it'll say some things on there. You're like, it's not quite right. You always want to personalize it. You always want to change it. Yes. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes. Thank you. Yes. And keep those comments coming. How's that? Is that better? Yes. All right. Perfect. Yeah. Keep those going. And in fact, I'm going to leave it also in this display mode just so I don't have to keep pressing escape and all that because I think you can see it. Now, I'm going to do something that's going to horrify you. This is the link that I just went to. Let's start a new chat. So it does not remember anything from the previous chat. There is no context between new chats. This is very important. If you keep interacting with it and saying no more like this, less more like this, it's exactly like a person that you keep saying on the wall, the picture needs to go here and here. Eventually it forgets, what are we talking about right now? Is it even a picture? Right. So then, if you do too many back and forth, just start a new chat and get it going again. But now I can ask it to do this. Summarize this link. Doesn't that sound wonderful? It's almost the same thing as cutting and pasting it in. Now, what if I told you it can't follow web links? It can't. It doesn't have that capability. However, in 2021 and before, my group's website existed, and it learned that that link means things like this. So what you need to know is that if I now do this, and I insert AlphaDog, there is no such page. There has never been anything called AlphaDog in my group. And it is now describing a software product called AlphaDog from my group. Now, I want to give a shout out to the company In ChatGPT 4, it says, you put a web link, that's a bad idea, I can't follow those. So they patched it. But this principle remains the same. It is not necessarily solving the problem like you think it's solving it. And instead of saying usually, oh, I'm sorry, I can't solve a problem like that, it interprets your question like this. What would this mean? What would this do? And it answers the question to the best it can, because it is a predictive system saying humans like you would say things like this about this object. So as long as you remember that context, you're safe. This is actually the worst hallucination I've ever seen. This is the one that, like, in my office for like half a day, I was like, it follows web links. That's really cool. Until I sent it a bad one and went, oh my God. All right. So I'm not actually going to force it to hallucinate anymore. I didn't encounter any other hallucinations as I was going, except maybe debating technical points on an answer it gave me or something like that. But that was the worst, and I think it gets at the point.
It does seem that challenges makes up on its own without kind of disclaimer.
But that's all it's ever doing.
And Lucas, could you repeat that just because probably
Oh,
no one
okay.
can hear? Yeah.
Never seems to be how can you get any kind of it's not
So the question is, if it's not repeatable and it's kind of making up what would happen, how do you get truth or veracity out of it? My response is, this is not a truth and veracity system. It is not a data lookup system. It is not pointing at true things. It is summarizing and aggregating a bunch of information together into a plausible narrative. That is very useful for some use cases. It is horrific if you wanted to always be correct and access a database and tell you only true entries in the database. That isn't what it's for. So it is not Google search. It is solving a different problem. You, because that's always what it's doing. It is always auto-predicting what would a human say here. That is all it knows of the world. It doesn't understand anything as true and false. It's just statistical relationships between words. And it always has some statistical relationships to follow. So it's not for that.
that's why it's not.
Because all answers are multimodal as well. Yet the question was, why is it non-repeatable? And the answer is because there are many possible answers. And it picks one that it seems plausible. But if it gives you one answer and then you say, do it again, it now has more information to give you a different answer because it remembers it. And that's actually a great segue. So how do you have a conversation with a system that's just auto-completing what you say? The answer is by passing in the entire chat so far, including its answers. So every time you type another question in the same chat, it's just submitting that entire thing as the next prompt, including the new thing that you added. And that allows you to keep saying things like, keep going, keep going, keep going. And it'll say other things as it goes because you're adding context as it goes forward. It's not really necessarily regenerating it. So if you start new chats and ask it the same question, then you'll really start sampling the variation. That's also in its ability, which it does have. Okay, but let's keep going. And then maybe we can get to the Q&A part. So now we're going to talk about a different use case. Let's learn about and interpret a new technical method. And I'm just going to run over here. This one, we start with what it already knows instead of giving it something to consider. And hopefully folks in 2X might sympathize with this. I have a spreadsheet containing the daily number of employees working locally at JPL, as well as their career levels, technical areas, education levels, and other personal information, which I do not provide and do not paste into the browser at any time.
And that is so critical to state.
I am
Thank you.
only talking about it. I am not providing it, okay? What methods could I use to quickly identify and summarize which of these variables meaningfully explains who is and who is not working locally? And it immediately goes through and gives you a little customized lesson and a bunch of different techniques you might consider to answer this question, including some machine learning ones which are near and dear to my heart. So let's say you read through this and you select one, in this case, linear regression. You don't yet know it, but you kind of have an idea that it might be useful. And by the way, you're really good at Excel. So create a step-by-step instruction on how to interpret regression coefficients in this problem in Excel. Focus on any advice or guidance to avoid common issues. And so now it actually tells me where to click in Excel to get this thing to do the analysis and then walks you through some of the interpretation. Are you now an expert in using regression to find explainable variables? No, but that's not bad for starting from nothing and with zero cost. It also, as it's talking about the different common gotchas, will start mentioning some keywords that you should probably know about. One of them is called collinearity, which is not intuitively obvious to everyone. So you might say, explain collinearity using a simple metaphor. And this is one of the things it does incredibly well. And it's a different metaphor every time. I sat there for like half an hour doing this going, that is not how I think of collinearity, but what a strange and interesting metaphor. I think I actually understand the concept even better now, just seeing all the different kinds of explanations that it came up with. So again, does this make you an expert in that? No, but it makes it kind of accessible and maybe you want to learn more. So your next question might be, what are some good references if I really want to know this topic? Don't trust what it says. Go find out in something that's a little more reputable. And it actually recommends a bunch of stuff. This is also where it gets in trouble. Everything it tells you is going to be 2021 or earlier. Some of the things don't exist anymore. And every once in a while, it gets a little creative. It says like a book like this would have been helpful. Remember the wood? So it'll actually kind of make one up a little bit. Chat 3.5, GPT 3.5 does this a lot more. In 4, they are clearly trying to stamp down the hallucinations as much as they can because everybody gets really alarmed. But I want you to just switch to the mental mode of this too. I'm not actually an apologist for the system, but I'm going to sound like it today. When I ask my friends for references, I have to do the same thing. Oh, there's a book out there. It's red. I think it's called this. You should look it up. No, there isn't. There is. Your memory is completely wrong, right? And you did the best you can. You're not intentionally lying to me, but trust but verify, right? So just treat it like that, and you're safe. It is not a database lookup engine. It's not trying to get the right answer.
So I'm gonna be late anyway. 5:30.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. In fact, that might one day be one of the things that it says. It says every once in a while it gets really creative too. And you're like, yeah, I guess I could call out to a library and ask for them for, to a research librarian to find. I'm like, wow, outside the box. Okay. And then finally, this is the sort of thing it's really good at. I keep trying to do the wows at the end here. My analysis so far suggests that early career employees, those without advanced degrees and those that build hardware, are the most likely to be working locally. Meanwhile, senior folks and those with advanced degrees favor fully remote. Provide several interpretations as to why this may be and how we could test these hypotheses. So wouldn't you like more management decisions to be made like that, right? And this one, it knocks out of the park, especially on the how would you test this. Here's the data you would now go and collect, and here's how you would interpret that data to substantiate this. Again, everything it says on here is probably not the perfect thing that an expert would say, but it's close enough that if even half of these are useful, it's enormously useful. So hopefully that's raising your eyebrows a little bit on yet another use case. All right, we have a few more to get through, and then you get to play with it. So draft a product description and name. And by the way, I'm now formally letting everybody know that I do not want to see any more crappy names on proposals anymore, right? Because it's really, really good at this. So write a technical product description that will help other technical people find my product in a large software catalog. Do you notice how much context I'm layering in on it? Focus on the facts, be concise. So otherwise it'll be like, this is the best product in the world, right? It starts doing marketing or something. Here's my content to rewrite. Used for these missions, written in Python, performed just boom, 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 totally boring, right? And it does a pretty good job. It just puts it together. I told it to be concise, so it is. It might be too concise. Then you might want to say you can use 75 words or whatever. You can be a little more specific. But that's okay. But now, what else might I include to be helpful to future users? Did I miss anything? This is an amazing new capability, and it starts suggesting maybe you want to talk about how compatible it is, what its performance is, the user interface, resources. You can then do it again. It comes up with other ideas. So that button at the bottom can be really neat when you're doing, and then what we're doing right now is ideation. What are some new ideas I might consider? And some of them you'll say duh about, and some of them you won't. Okay. Now, please, this is another big thing. Now, please rewrite it to say it's an open source product and currently the leading algorithm in terms of computational performance. Takes the old version and just adds that for you right now. You can do this yourself. Of course you can. but that's actually a little faster. I also notice it adds other things too for free. It gets a little like, well, if you want that, you probably also want these other things. So, and one of the lessons to learn here is you're not trying to get the system to say the right answer. That's the wrong modality. You're trying to get it close enough that you cut, paste it, and then you edit it, and now you're there. So you can spend all day going, oh, it's not quite right, and trying to explain to it how to do it. That isn't using it right. You're not teaching it. It's not going to be able to do this faster next time.
Have you noticed whether it helps when you say please?
I have not attempted to be more polite to it. Feel free to look it up to test it yourself. Now, yes.
Correctly, start a new session. It's identical from the session.
Correct.
So if you give the same prompt sessions, you still get different answers.
If you repeat the same prompt in new sessions, you get different answers, and the answer is yes. It is a stochastic process.
So where?
Because the answer is multimodal. What humans said is multimodal. So it's sampling from that distribution. Absolutely. Which is also eerily human-like.
So if you keep with the same question,
I would assume you eventually saturate. Yeah.
but you get contradiction.
I have never observed that to be the case, but that sounds like a great experiment to run. See if you can trip it up. I will tell you, if you're doing it in the same session, trying to like exhaust it, it'll eventually start losing the context at the beginning because it only has so much context window. So if you just keep on going forever, it'll actually start repeating itself because it can't remember it already said it. All right. So now, this is with the wow part again. Suggest 10 acronym names for this product. Each word in the acronym must be used only once per letter and only consider acronyms with more than 3 letters. Favor words related to the atmosphere. Boom. This is why I don't want to see crappy names anymore. It doesn't always get it right, but they're remarkable. Yeah. I mean, just think about the missions out there that are called ACRS-C2, right? Like, give me a break. This is also where people have lots of fun. There is a place in the community spreadsheet that's called for fun, and you can add whatever you want in there. You can say, you know, and describe the mission like Carl Sagan. Now do it like a bored teenager, right? You can, and it's eerily good at all that too, style transfer and stuff, but that's not what we're going to be talking about today. All right. Let's keep going. All right. Suggest and adopt a data schema. I am in a data processing pipeline section. People take data schemas very seriously. How do we capture data, reason about it, put it in a database, and compare it? So people sit around worrying that we put all the variables in it, and hopefully this is going to make them be very, very excited. All right. Whoops, that was the wrong one. I'm making a database to store technical papers. Suggest a JSON schema to capture papers as an object based on the paper I'm about to give you. Focus on keys that are generalizable between many technical papers in multiple fields. I'll give you the paper text in the next prompt. Tell me when you're ready. Okay, I'm ready. Give me the text. And now what I want to show you is not just that, but, oh, that's wonderful. That is not at all what I meant to pop up. Technical difficulties, one moment. There we go. This is a paper that I wrote, so again, I'm not making anybody angry, but this is a PDF. And how many people have cut and paste from PDFs before? That is a nightmare, right? Who cares? So let's take 2 pages of that text and just paste it in. And there is a JSON object right now that is pre-populated from that paper with the keys generated for you that best describe the paper, and in a way that is somewhat reproducible to other papers as well. Is everything here completely correct? No, but it is really, really close. So you can start from here and you can edit it going forward. You may disagree. If you substantially disagree with it, let it know. I don't like this, I do like this, and it does it again. If it's editable, just edit it. But now let's keep going again. I'm just going to shrink that down. Oftentimes, when it's talking to you, it might actually not complete. There is a limit on how much text it'll put out. If you want it to keep going, you say keep going, and then it continues. Now, right now, it actually did complete, and that's actually surprising. I got to warn you about something. I tried so hard to look up exactly how much text comes out, how much context window it has, and from the best that I can tell, they're adjusting it dynamically based on load. And the system itself tells you it's complicated, don't worry about it. So I can't actually give you a fixed number right now on exactly when it's considering what. It's fairly large. It also tells you that prompt was too big. It'll tell you that. It won't do something wacky. But it is really hard to do it. But that's what keep going is for. If it stops in the middle of an answer, you just tell it to keep going. Now, maybe you made a mistake or you want to compare something. Now display it as a YAML file. Okay, there's the same thing, but instead as a YAML file now. And again, this is kind of a schema discussion. Now go back to the JSON object that we have and write a little HTML page that documents it for me. There it is in HTML. You can cut and paste this in your browser and confirm that it works. And you want to use the keep going again. Now, for this case, I do want to mention something. You can't yet use ChatGPT, there it is, to be the reformatting in a data pipeline. After it does this, you can't say, great, now do it 10,000 times on this entire database. It can't handle that. You would have to be able to edit, to add all those things as a prompt. It's not what the system's for, but it can create the schema, describe it, and even write the code that would then do it for you, but it can't actually do that yet. Believe me, they're working on it. Because if you could describe what it does, verify a few items, and then say, now export to pipeline and do it for everything, that is an enterprise solution that everybody's going to want. Exactly, yeah. And I do want to say this is not a standalone product. There are so many competitors out there to look into. So thank you. I should have mentioned that already in the talk. I am not endorsing this as a unique product. I am endorsing it as a class that we should evaluate. All right. And actually, let me just make sure that I hit all the other points I wanted to from these ones. Yes. All right. Almost done. And then you get to play. So, and we were about to get to competitor products. You were perfectly on point. Let's actually do some coding now. This is also the highest risk item, so we'll see how it goes. I'm going to briefly switch to ChatGPT 4 just to show you what it looks like, just so you can have exposure to it. You have to pay for this one. It's not free, just to remind you. But here's what we're going to solve. And the version 3 would work as well here. Complete this function. Here's the dict strings. Here's the function name, what I'm expecting. And here's a little comment saying what it's supposed to do. This is not, as any coder in the room knows, this is a very simple function. This is not going to wow anybody, except for the fact that it actually works and produces that out. Do you notice how much slower it is, though? It really is, churning a little bit, but the answers are much, much higher quality. They are more thoughtful, and it gives better explanations at the end of here's why I did what I did. It tries to explain itself a little more, which is nice. It seems to have more context of what we're doing in ChatGPT itself. Now, that thing we just documented to the Sphinx standard, and now it's documented. All right, I can't imagine how much time I would have saved in the past for that. So again, one of the things that you often do is you go off and you think of your next prompt while it's working, very normal. Now, check the function for potential vulnerabilities and exploits. Is this a guaranteed thing that there's no vulnerabilities and exploits in the entire system? No, I guarantee you it is not that complete. Does it give you great ideas that you should think about, especially if this isn't your job to always do that? It's fantastic and tells you what you should think about and where and maybe even how to repair it. Of course, the basic functionality of now converted into another language, that's actually quite simple for it. And I'm making it go a little faster here just because I don't want you to sit and wait. Now document that C++ version to the Doxygen standard, right? And maybe that's what your product works over there. This one, I think, is actually kind of revolutionary, though. And this is what distinguishes it from other competitor products that are like GitHub Copilot. GitHub Copilot can autocomplete text too. GitHub Copilot can even talk about errors as you get them and things, but it can't yet do this. Using the Python version, write some unit tests for the function. And it starts coming up with reasonable unit tests that other people like you have considered, right? Already written and evaluated for you. Except I should also say the speed that it performs at varies over the function of the day and everything else you can imagine. And this is right in prime time. So I knew I was in a little bit of trouble today. And after it does that, you could say, what are some other unit tests I could consider? And it gets wacky. It starts saying, like, here's some real edge cases that you might want to protect yourself and sanitize your input. So it even has that kind of creative aspect to it, not just the standard things, but some more edgy type things to protect yourself from. And it starts talking about why you actually might want to do some of these ideas. Now, this one is hilarious. I call this one a reverse hallucination. This function is fine if I run it right now, but the function is causing a seg fault when I run it. Where might I look to find out why? Just like it assumes you're asking what would a human say and it creates something. If you say something's true, it's true, even if it isn't true. And what I just said isn't true, but it has to believe it. So it auto-completes. And the first thing it says is kind of like, that's kind of weird that it would be creating a seg fault, like, don't you think? But since it does, and then it walks you through debugging your operating system, maybe your memory's bad, right? It really starts going out of the box to try to explain how this simple function is creating a seg fault. But it just reminds you that you have a lot of responsibility right now, because if you assert something is true, it is for the rest of the conversation. So be careful with that too. All right, we're almost done with the examples. One more. This is entirely in the writing sphere now. Make a new chat. Start with a 3.5 for speed. I'm going to provide you with some text that I want you to rewrite. Focus on clarity. I'll provide it to you in the next prompt. That's an easy way to just tell it I'm going to give you something. And did that exactly go? Ah, there it is. Bunch of text I took from a paper that I wrote, and I'm going to totally embarrass myself because I can handle it. And it rewrites it for me into 3 distinct paragraphs in pretty clear form. So that's already nice. I could self-educate. I could read through that and go, what did it do? Do I like it? All that good stuff. But let's keep going. Compare the 2 versions. What's different between them? Oh, it's actually thinking for, there it goes. The original was relatively technical and complex, which is difficult for some readers to understand. The new version is shorter sentences, avoids complex structures. There's one idea per sentence, all these ideas. It gives me a critique of my writing style pretty mercilessly, which I thought was great. So, now I feel a little sheepish, but it was a rewrite. And when you rewrite, you emphasize things and de-emphasize things. So was anything left out? And it'll actually go on and say, there are some details that I left out. This time it was a little terser. Last time I did this, it actually said in my rewrite, I chose to eliminate these 2 technical details, but for some technical readers that may be important, so you consider it. That was a great answer. Oh, that was in GPT-4 that it did that. In the 3, it's much simpler. Okay, you've told me I'm not a great writer. What was confusing in the original? These were, right? These were bad ideas. Don't do that anymore. And then, of course, just to show off a little bit, and now put it in French. So it even learned that, right? Because other languages are definitely a language. Now, I do not know French, so I cannot validate that this is excellent French. I have no way to do that. I did, however, cut and paste this into another ChatGPT session and convert back to English, and it looked great there. So at least if it's mutilating it, it's unmutilating in the same way. And I put it into Google Translate, and that actually looked pretty good too. Though I liked its translation better than Google Translate, to be honest. It maintained more of the context, and that's exactly what a large language model should be able to do. So those are all the inspiring examples that I wanted to let you experience today. Hopefully, you're now considering, the system might actually be useful to me in some way, shape, or form. I would argue, and this is now my opinion, this is not a fact. I would argue that if you work in some of the areas that we've just shown are useful, and you aren't using some kind of AI augmentation in this way, some kind of large language model to help you out, you are doing the equivalent of supporting your project with mathematics while refusing to use a calculator and a computer. Why would you do that? You are wasting their money. It is not about ego. It is not about pride. Go figure out if it's useful. If it's not useful, don't use it. No one's telling you to do that. But this is an enormous accelerator. So it is now on us incumbent to figure out what it's good for. And that's what we're about to do. The last thing I want to leave you with is the entire system, as you saw, is controlled by prompts. You tell it what you want. And you're about to go explore and actually interactively do this together, I hope. So what makes a good prompt? There's right and wrong ways to do it. And here are some things to think about. Be very specific. What are you looking for? Don't deny it context. If you come to me and say, hey, I want a list of these 3 topics, I know that you are human and I know all this context about you, and then I fill in the blanks. It can't really do that. It's going to answer what you said. So you might need to be a little more literal in your question. Do it like this, not like this. Assume you're kind of annoyed with it It's a good mental metaphor of how you should sound when you tell it to do something, like it's already got it wrong 3 times. Know also what you don't want. If there's specific outcomes you don't want, just tell it that, and it won't do it. Constraints and guides are super useful. I only want you to use up to 200 words, avoid obvious answers. I want at least 3 suggestions, just be specific. It always seems to default back to a paragraph. Anything you ask it, it gives you a paragraph. So if you didn't want a paragraph, say so. Also give it any context. And this is the role-playing stuff. It's hilarious. You are an expert, brilliant professor in machine learning at a university. I am a humble student that knows accounting, and I need to understand this topic. Please walk me through the initial lecture. Hello, class. Thank you. It's wonderful to be here with you today. It goes into it, and then it gives you a breathtaking narration that is exactly what you asked for, with a little bit of humor on either side. That's especially useful when you're using it to generate correspondence. You can tell it the role of the 2 parties in the correspondence. Desired format as a bulleted list broken down in step-by-step instructions as a JSON object in French, and then iterate. As you saw, a lot of the power of it is the fact that it's not a one-stop shop. Google Foo taught us that if you don't get the right answer, you edit the original prompt. That's no longer true. You clarify as you go forward again. If you want more, just keep going. And if there's too much back and forth, start a new chat. It will eventually get tangled on itself. And that's it. So now it's your turn to actually do some stuff. And here's what the structure that I'm suggesting for it. Online, Jake Lee, who's been my partner in crime on this entire endeavor, has created several breakout rooms in the virtual environment. They are named by the same thematic groups that you saw earlier in the discussion, as well as 1, 2, 3, 4. That's so that if 100 people all charge into one of them, you can choose another room where maybe there's less than 100 people, so you can actually be heard. The point is to interact. This community is brilliant, and we need to talk to each other to figure this out. It's not a good spoke model. We should be using each other. So start having those conversations, log into the community document, explore it, see what's there, play with it, refine it. And if you come up with something new, please, please, please write it into the document so we can all use it later on. I also want to remind everybody, I want you to vote. In that document on the right, just add your name. You get 4 votes. Please try to convey, I will be able to count. So only vote 4 times, but that will tell me what people think is dramatically useful for their current role at JPL. That's what we're asking about. Not a hypothetical, but I'm going to go and use this now. And hopefully that's after you play with it a little bit so you know what you're talking about. If you haven't made an account, they authorize accounts immediately. Use your Gmail to do it. And that's it. In the real room here, I put little stickies on the wall, and you can spatially group and do exactly the same thing. You don't have to log into the virtual space to be able to access it. One of the breakout rooms will be Q&A if you want to talk about the presentation. I am not an expert that represents OpenAI. That's not what I'm being. I'm trying to be a facilitator for the community to talk to itself. But if you have questions about what I put in the presentation, I'm happy to talk with you about it. And now let's go meet each other. And thank you.